Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. My name is Reika, and I am your host. Today's episode is our 20th episode, and every 10 episode, I am going to do a solo episode. So today is a little special episode for you where I will be sharing some of wisdoms and lessons that I have learned along the way of being a full-time yoga teacher. Before we get in it, I want to give you a little update. I am currently recording this episode from Cusco in Peru. So I have about 2 weeks off from my yoga teacher training job. So I decided to come to Cusco to spend some time here. I've been here before, but it's been more than a decade. And it's been really fun walking around this beautiful town, enjoying the view, getting a little break from humidity and rain and bugs. Cusco is very, very high in altitude. So it's much cooler and it has that kind of like a dry mountain climate. If you have heard of Machu Picchu, Cusco is where usually people come and stay before they head out to go see Machu Picchu. I am planning to do some work on my laptop for my online business, as well as learn some Spanish while I'm here, maybe taking a Spanish class, and still continue teaching my online yoga studio, as well as mentorship during my time here. There are cute cafes everywhere that I could bring my laptop and do some work. So really loving the vibe of this city so far. So that's kind of the update right now. So today's episode, I want to talk about 9 questions to ask yourself when you are deciding to whether keep the specific yoga class or not. If you've been teaching for a while, it's quite normal for yoga teachers to kind of go through classes. Like you get rid of certain classes and you add more classes. So your schedules are constantly changing, hopefully not too often, but there is going to be a time for you that you decide that this class is not for you anymore. And maybe you try to bring in another class from another studio or location that fits your need and feels more in alignment with you. So I have gone through so many classes that I choose to let go and also choose to add. And that's just part of full-time yoga teacher life. So these are the 9 questions that have helped me decide whether it is time to let go of this class or do I keep this class. These questions I think can be very, very helpful for yoga teachers. So I did make a PDF with these 9 questions that's kind of formatted in a very beautiful infographic way. So if you do want to download that PDF, I'll leave a link on my show notes. If you want to put your email address there, you will receive the PDF or infographic of these 9 questions that I'm about to talk about today. So out of these 9 questions, I hope that you can meet about 5 of these questions that you can say yes to for you to keep the class that you're thinking about whether to keep or not. So the first question is, this class is incredibly challenging to teach, and I am learning so much. I think this is important because some class, especially if you're a new teacher, you're just learning so much from teaching a class. You're learning so much from gaining this experience of permanent weekly classes that you are growing so much as a teacher. And that can be enough to keep the class, is that you are learning so much. It can be challenging, or it's using a different part of your brain that the return is huge in terms of how much you're growing and learning as a yoga teacher. Next question, I guess they're not a question, they're like a statement. But the next thing to consider is that you love the students in this class. Sometimes the students and the community are the factor that you stay. You just love teaching the students or your community. It's true, your job is so much more fun when you love the people that you work with or you work for. So if you really love the students, the community that you're teaching, then that can be a very strong reason why you stay to continue teaching this class. I have built some great friendship from teaching at a studio that I really love the students. I have become really good friends with students in the past. So I think definitely this is one of the most important factor. You really want to love, enjoy working there because you love the people that you surround yourself with. So that's number 2. Third thing to consider is that this class pays well. When I was a newer teacher, I almost said yes to everything, even if the pay was really low. And I think that is okay because I am learning so much and gaining so many experience from teaching at that location. So that was more important than the pay. But I think as you start teaching, for me, especially as a full-time teacher, it comes a point where it's smart to choose to keep the classes that pays well and slowly get rid of the classes aren't paying you as well. At one point in my teaching career, I was teaching close to 30 classes a week. I think 28, 29 classes were some of my largest number of classes I taught a week. And I was exhausted. I was exhausted and I was burnt out. My body was tired. My mind was tired. And in this case, I knew I had to let go of some classes because it just wasn't sustainable for me to continue teaching this many classes a week. So classes that paid the least amount, a lot of time had to be the one to go. This can be hard because maybe you love the students or maybe you love the experience you're gaining at teaching this place, but it comes a point where it's just not worth it anymore. If I am exhausting myself by teaching 30 classes a week, I just have to narrow down the classes I teach, and I have to keep the higher paying positions and then slowly let go of the lower paying one or ask for a raise at the lower paying one. So I think pay of the class is a huge indicator on whether to choose to continue teaching there or not. And I think definitely asking the studio owner for a raise, if you've been teaching there for a while, is a great idea if you really love teaching there. But you can also, choose to continue teaching 1 or 2 classes a week there instead of 5, for example, if the pay is low, but you love teaching there. So that's number 3, the pay. Number 4 is that, do you love the material, the content that you get to teach in this class? So I know that some studio want you to teach a set sequence. Some studio want you to teach a very specific way or have to play a specific music. Maybe you have to teach a specific style of class. So another great factor to think about is whether you love what you're teaching there, or maybe you love that you get a freedom to teach whatever you want in that location. So I think that's another important part. I actually never had to work for a studio where I had to teach a set sequence, or I had a lot of rules and regulations and guidelines around how and what I can teach, as long as it was still considered the title of the class. For example, if it was vinyasa class I'm teaching, I'm not going to teach yin, but I usually teach at a place where there's a level, beginner vinyasa or advanced vinyasa or all level vinyasa. So as long as I stay within that guideline, I always worked at a place that I had the freedom to teach whatever sequence I wanted and music I wanted to play, or choose not to play music if I wanted to. So for me, that's important. It'll be hard for me to teach at a place where I had to teach a set sequence. So there was a lot of rules and regulation I had to follow in terms of what kind of sequence I could teach. So I think it depends on whether you like what you get to teach there. Do you have the freedom to teach? Or maybe you like teaching set sequence. So considering what you get to teach and do you love what you get to teach in this space, I think is important, because when you are teaching what you love, you are glowing, you're passionate about it, and you are genuine and being authentic about what you're sharing when you're sharing what you love. So that's number 4. Number 5 is that you are making a great contact for potential private clients and workshops or retreat participants. So maybe sometime you are not getting paid too well at the studio, or maybe you don't love the type of class you get to teach there, but it's a great exposure for you. Maybe you get to be exposed to different students. Maybe your class is pretty big because it's a big studio or location you work at. So more people know you, more people maybe follow you on social media, or more people join your newsletter, then you have created a potential future opportunities by working at this location. Whenever you offer a private offering, a workshop, a retreat, you have a bigger pool of student base because of working at this location, that you get to share your upcoming offerings. So I think that's another pretty important factor to think about. I have spoken and interviewed many senior teachers who's been teaching for a long time, and they say that studio classes, even though they may not pay as well as doing a private or corporate, but studio classes, they always want to keep at least a handful in their schedule, because that's how other people can get to know them. That's how other students discover you as a teacher. That's how students decide they want to follow you on social media, or that's how students decide they want to join your newsletter. So more reach you can have when you do start offering workshop, retreat, or one-on-one offering, it's going to benefit you in the future. And most of my private clients that I have ever received came from teaching a group class at a studio or a location. It's whether they came up to me to ask if I offer private because they really enjoy the way I teach, or they recommended their friends or family to do a private with me. So I think it's a great way to be exposed to a bigger group of people. So that's why sometimes teaching at a certain location or studio, even if it doesn't pay well, or even you don't get to really teach what you want to teach, that can be enough factor to continue teaching there, is that you're making great contact and maybe potential future clients and participants. So that's number 5. Number 6, you love the studio space that you work at. You not only love the studio space, but maybe owners and managers of the studio. I think that's important too. I have worked for a place that I no longer felt aligned working at. And it was a very, very difficult decision to make for me to leave the studio, because I loved the students. I was making great contacts. I got to teach whatever I wanted, but I could not continue working at the studio that I did not feel ethically and morally aligned with. This took me a while to make this decision to leave the studio, so I don't think this is an easy, quick decision to make. But if you start to have this little voices in your heart that started to feel like, doesn't feel very right anymore, or this little discomfort, or maybe even a little ick that you start to have at the studio that you work at, or maybe from the manager or owner, I think it's worthwhile to pay attention to these words or voices in your head, or this feeling. Sometimes it's a physical feeling that you get in your body. And in my experience, these feelings and voices gets louder and louder. The sensations of not feel aligned or ick gets louder and louder. And at that moment, I cannot ignore it anymore. So I felt aligned with my value and ethics to no longer work for a studio. So that's a decision that, it took a time for me to make. And I don't think it's an easy one. And these, voices and bodily sensation of not feeling aligned working at a certain location, I think it comes slow. First, it's a very subtle sensation, and it slowly gets louder and louder until you cannot ignore it. And when you continue to ignore it, I think from my experience, what happened is I start to resent either the studio, I start to resent the time slot that I'm working. I start to resent the owners or managers. I start to resent myself. I start to resent the students. So in the end, it's good for everybody involved to make the decision that feels aligned to you. So that's number 6, that you enjoy the studio space or location that you work at, you enjoy and you feel aligned with the location as well as the studio owners and manager. All right. Number 7, the class you're teaching fills up your heart. Maybe it really feels fulfilling to you. It fills up your cup. I don't know if you ever felt this way before, but some class I will finish teaching and feel very drained. And some class I'll finish teaching and I feel full, like my energy has been refueled up. My battery has been charged. So that's another important sensation to pay attention to. I have taught at places that maybe didn't pay as well, and I had to travel quite some distance to get to teach. But I loved teaching there. I loved the students. I loved what I was teaching. I felt very, very fulfilled in teaching at that location. And I really felt like it was my purpose to teach there. So even if the pay wasn't as great, even if I had to travel quite some distance, I think that can be definitely a factor for you to teach at a location. And that's why you see some teachers volunteering their time to teach at certain locations for a nonprofit organization. And obviously, you have to have financial means. You have to make sure your bills are met and you are able to pay rent and you are able to buy food for yourself before you can volunteer time to teach. I think first you have to make sure your basic needs are covered. But if you have some extra time, and for you teaching that demographics or teaching at that location is so fulfilling, I think it's worthwhile to keep it as well, no matter the cost, no matter the pay, no matter the location or a distance. Number 8, this class is in a place and a time and distance that is easy and not draining to get to. So I kind of talked about this before. For me, the distance and accessibility to get to a location that I teach is huge. If you have to travel 1 hour to get to a gym or a studio to teach a class, or if you have to sit in traffic for 45 minutes, or maybe it's a pain to find parking at this location that you're teaching at. All of these things can be a huge factor for your overall well-being, and it can be a huge factor for whether you feel exhausted after teaching, whether you get burnt out from teaching. I think this is a huge, huge factor to consider. I think I am a little bit of an outlier for a full-time yoga teacher in Los Angeles. Because I never owned a car. I used to ride my bicycle around to go teach at different locations. And then later I bought a scooter. So I ride my scooter around. So parking always has been quite easy for me. Plus, I could only choose to work at a location that was either biking or scooter distance away from me. So maybe like 10-mile radius. So I never had to travel too far or sit in traffic for very long to teach at a location, which I think was, since I was kind of forced to make that decision to only work at a place that's near me, I'm very grateful of that because I've seen many teachers in LA and I'm sure in other big cities who have to drive from studio to studio, and just sitting in traffic or driving can take you a couple of hours. Or at the end of the day, maybe you have sit in your car for like 3 hours, 4 hours to go teach at all these locations. So that can be super draining. Depends on the person. Some people are willing to sit in traffic and drive for long distance to go teach at a place, but that's something to definitely consider. For example, if you're only getting paid 1 hour of your time to teach one class, but it takes you, let's say 30 minutes to get there, 30 minutes to get back, that's 2 hours of your time, but you're only getting paid for 1 hour. Imagine if you have to drive 1 hour to get to a place, 1 hour to come back. That's 1 hour time that you're getting paid, 3 hours of your day that you're spending. So I think these are all very important things to consider. Sometimes that's why it's worthwhile to teach a class back to back at one location, rather than one class there and one class in another part of town. If you can teach a double or maybe even triple, it might make it more worth a while with time. So I think location, place, time, distance, amount of traffic you have to sit and wait, as well as maybe amount of time it takes for you to find parking, can be a huge factor for whether the class is worth it for you to keep or not. Last one, number 9, is very similar to number 6. So number 6 was you love the studio space and owners of the studio that you work at. Number 9 is that you feel morally and ethically aligned with the studio's mission and what they stand for. And I think explanation for this is pretty much similar to what I explained in number 6. But from my experience, if you don't feel aligned with their morals, ethics, and missions of the studio or studio owners or manager, it's going to slowly eat away in you. I think it's you, that voice, that ick, that sensation. Your body knows that it's not a right place. We just choose to ignore the voices and the signs and the communication that our body or our inner knowing tells us. And when you continue to ignore it, you might start to resent the time that you go in to teach there. So I think it's so, so important for you to listen to that, listen to your inner knowing, listen to your body, listen to that voice that slowly gets louder and louder over time. And of course, sometimes we're not in a financial situation to be able to quit a class or let go of a class or let go working at a studio because you don't feel morally and ethically aligned there. You still need to make money. So I totally 100% agree with that. But I think it's worthwhile if you realize that you don't morally and ethically align with the studio anymore. I think it's worthwhile to start investigating and searching other options or places you could teach so you can eventually slowly let go of the classes and not work at the studio you don't align with. If I don't feel aligned, I can't hide that. I'm not going to be able to bring my best self and teach the best class I can be at that location if I morally and ethically don't feel aligned working there or working for studio or working for this particular owner or manager. So definitely listen to that voice, listen to your body. And when you realize that it may not be the right place for you anymore, but you can't financially afford to quit, start looking. Start looking for other places, other locations to work for, teach other way to earn money so that you don't have to work at a place that is not bringing you joy, that you feel constricted, that you feel like you are going against your intuition, your purpose, your dharma. So that's a big learning experience that I want to share with all of you. So that's 9 things to consider or think about when deciding to either quit a location or let go of a class time slot, or whether to keep it and keep working there, keep teaching this class. So I'm going to review from number 1 again. Number 1, this class is incredibly challenging to teach and I am learning so much. Number 2, I love the students in this class. Number 3, this class pays well. Number 4, I love the material I get to teach in this class. Number 5, I am making good contact for potential private clients and workshop and retreat participants. Number 6, I love the studio space and the owners of the studio. Number 7, this class is a seva offering that fills your heart. So it really fills you up to teach there. Number 8, this class is in a place and at a time and distance that is easy and not draining to get to. Number 9, I feel morally and ethically aligned with the studio's mission and what they stand for. One thing I forgot to mention in number 6, I love the studio space and the owners of the studio. I want to mention that sometimes you really love the studio space. Like it's a beautiful space. Maybe I love the beautiful space that's very bright and has natural light. And then I also worked at a place that is dark and it feels like I'm in a dungeon. And for me, I love the place that's bright and, lots of windows and natural light. So, if it's going to bring you down to work at a place that's dark and it's like a dungeon and Maybe it's a gym and there are no yoga props there. So, those kind of things that are starting to annoy you, that can be also a considering factor for whether to choose to continue working there or not. Is a studio space. Do you love the space, the vibe, or do you feel like it's draining you to go teach there? So that's part of number 6 that I forgot to mention. So these are the 9 things to consider, think about when you are deciding whether to keep this yoga class or not, or when you are deciding to teach at this location or not. Like I said earlier, I have made a more visually pleasing infographic PDF that goes along with this podcast episode. So if you want to have access to this PDF, all you have to do is go to the show notes, click on the link, put your email address, and the PDF will be sent to you. As always, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this solo episode. If you have any questions, thoughts, or recommendations of what I should talk about or who I should interview, don't hesitate to write me, message me. My Instagram is @Reika Yoga, and my website is www.reikayoga.com. And I will speak to you next week with a brand new interview.